Metal Hurlant #1, published by Les Humanoides Associes, aka the Associated Humanoids, in 1975. Today we are looking at the first two issues of Metal Hurlant, published in 1975 by Les Humanoides Associes, aka the Associated Humanoids, consisting of Philippe Druillet, Jean Giraud, aka Mobius, Jean-Pierre Dionnet, and Bernard Farkas. So as you've noticed, these issues are bound in a hardcover. I got this a while back, and as you can see there, it says Metal Hurlant. So somebody made this and put the first 7 issues of Metal Hurlant in a bound volume. And it was really inexpensive, folks, so I snagged it very quickly. So that is what you're looking at here. One of the advantages with having issues in a bound volume is that often they are unscathed. They're all in one volume and they're more protected that way. Now, of course, the drawback is that they're bound into a volume forever. So you can't just take these out. They're permanently in a hardcover edition, and of course many collectors don't like that. The titles changed, obviously, the graphics of the titles. This changed, as you will see. I love this kind of alien head there that they have in the graphics for the title. I think that's totally great. But you can see for issue number 2, they changed it up a bit, and they stuck with this for many issues. I mean, it pretty much looked exactly the same layout and everything. Let us go to the editorial by Jean-Pierre Dionnet, and of course it is in French, but I have translated it. The 19th of December, 1974, at 4 o'clock in the morning local time, at the limits of Livry-Gargan and the forest of Clichy, finally we are united. Philippe Druillet, the paranoid illuminator, Mobius alias Jure, alias Giraud, alias the draftsman with 1,000 faces, Jean-Pierre Dionnet said, "Grat, your servant," of course that is Dionnet writing this, and Bernard Farkas, who came to put a little order in our grandiose projects and a little soul in our accounts, decided simultaneously and unanimously to reply henceforth only to the collective name of Les Humanoides Associes, the Associated Humanoids, and to finally republish Les Bandards Fous, aka The Horny Goof, by Mobius, this mythical book for too long out of print, and to release every 3 months, quarterly, a science fiction magazine of comic strips where they would complacently spread their putrid fantasies, the same one you now hold in your chapped or manicured hands, and to prepare many other things. For this they worked like beasts, losing food and drink, waking up at night to write down their nightmares. And they even went to find Etienne Robial from Futuropolis. A note from me, Robial ran Futuropolis. We will see ads here in Metal Hurlant, who drew the title. So Robial actually came up with the title graphic here, which is totally great, who drew the title and put the pages into form. Now, hid behind a large eagle-sized board to shelter from the wind, they are no longer waiting, but moaning with impatience for your verdict. Jean-Pierre Dionnet. So one thing we see right off the bat, they have finished the magazine. It is December 19th, 1974, so it was officially done. It was just published in January of 1975. So as we look through Metal Hurlant #1, we're going to see, of course, similarities with this and Heavy Metal #1. And I'm going to show you a couple of slight differences, and these are differences in printing that I think are worthy of mention. So we begin with Mobius and Approaching Centauri. Now I believe this story appears in Heavy Metal issue number 2. Once again, incredible freaking line work by Mobius. It's just stunning, really. I mean, in black and white or in color. It's amazing stuff. And we're going to see some more Mobius in color in just a second. I just love this. Yeah, if you're not familiar with the story, this astronaut goes into a hyperdrive, and he zaps, Zeta Zero Zap, and he zaps out, and then he's free falling, and he falls into this area where there's just like, it's like he's falling into hell. And he sees these creatures that are standing on top of a mountain form, and the creatures attack him. And they just start gouging his eyes out and just ripping him up and start feasting on his body. Then he screams and he wakes up and he's vomited on himself. And they're like, "Sir, are you all right? We're about to go into hyperdrive." And he's like, "No, it's fine, everything's good." And then they proceed with the real countdown. And Zeta Zero Zap, the end. Pretty cool. This is some magazine that was out at the time called Rock and Folk. Hawkwind, right there, folks. Roxy Music. Woohoo! Now here's Philippe Druillet with Rut. And this guy in space, he's in his spaceship, and suddenly he's attacked by this giant monster. It gets onto a spaceship there. And this monster starts screwing his spaceship. It's literally screwing it. And all these little semen monsters come through, and they start attacking the guy. They're ripping his clothes off and stuff, and he's got to do something, so he blasts the rocket and he goes running into space. And the guy eventually battles, he's battling all these little sperm monsters, and he kills them all, but then he's like, uh-oh, gloop. And of course they've impregnated him. The end. Another Mobius piece, totally humorous, definitely science fiction. But you've got this guy building a robot, right? So you see him, he's putting the parts together. Then there's like a skin he puts over it, and it looks like a Playboy bunny. You're like, yeah. So he turns it on, and he's like, ah, yes, oh, my mon chéri, And she turns around, kicks him in the nuts. And he's like, aye! And she just continues to, like, beat the crap out of him, and he runs to the door. Again, we get to Mobius now. This is full-color Mobius with one of his classic strips from Metal Hurlant, Arzak. And this stuff is just beautiful. The color reproduction is stunning. As you can see here, I mean, it's a visual feast, folks. You can just look at each panel and marvel at what this guy is doing, and the colors just make it pop. We start with some hardcore Droulet, Philippe Druillet. One narrow vertical panel on a page. Blank. Then the panels start. You get 2 panels, then you get 3 panels. The story of Agorn. Fantastic. This is just mind-boggling pen and ink. It is mind-boggling pen and ink, folks. I don't really know what else to say about it, but geez Louise, man. This guy is... just looking at this, if you've ever drawn a page with some detail, like a full page like this, and you look at the detail on this page, you have to wonder how long it took Droulet to do one of these pages. And he did many of these. Not only did he do single pages like this, he did double pages, as we will see. Here's another single page. Intricate work, intricate line work on this horse creature. There we go. I mean, look at that. Jeez Louise, man. That is just something. Richard Corben. And you'll notice one thing in issue number 1 of Metal Hurlant. It's Richard Corben, but it is not Den. Den would not appear in Metal Hurlant until issue number 3. The first 2 issues had singular one-shot Corben stories in them. And this one is actually from 1971. The guys from Metal Hurlant, these French dudes, right? They were watching the undergrounds, other comic book artists, of course, from around the world, including the United States. Sid and Opie is from an underground comic released in 1971 called Up from the Deep. It was a simple 8 to 10 page comic book story, and but the colors are once again just fantastic. You know, and their reproduction is flawless. And I remember having, back in the late 70s, early 80s, I remember having issue number 1 of Metal Hurlant, issue number 3, and then I think it was issue number 27. I didn't have many of them, but I loved the ones I could get my hands on. One of the things that I didn't realize at the time is that Bud Plant was the distributor. He was the American distributor for Metal Hurlant. And Bud Plant was all over the place, like at conventions. I would go to a science fiction convention, like the World Science Fiction Convention, and Bud Plant would be there with this stuff. And it may have been, and I don't remember this, I mean, it's been years, folks, but it may have been that I bought a few of the issues that I had from Bud Plant. I don't read French, and you know, back then or now. But what happened is that I saw issue number 1 somewhere. I picked it up and I was looking at it and I was like, oh my God, there's stuff in here that's not in Heavy Metal magazine. Heavy Metal had already come out, so when I found Metal Hurlant, it must have been 77 or 78. You know, maybe 79. But as I looked at issue number 1, I realized, wait a second, this isn't exactly like, you know, Heavy Metal just simply reprinted issue number 1 of Metal Hurlant. No, no, no. They used a lot of the same stories, but of course Heavy Metal started using American artists as well in their pages, and it was just a different type of thing. You had Sid and Opie as the Richard Corben opener. It's a simple story. These kind of alien creatures, you know, a couple, they're playing in the forest and having a good old naked time about it. And so they start going and they notice these giants that are laying in the field. Little guys right there, they're like almost like ants, and there's these huge giants that are resting in a field. And meanwhile, there's this other creature that's sniffing them. And he's like, yeah, what? I smell food. Good Lord. So, of course, as they're looking at these giants, the creature attacks and bites Opie on the leg. And then Sid forms a quick plan of a quick strategy to deal with the beast. And they start battling, and Sid is just beating the crap out of this creature and subdues him at the end. And so they're all right. You know, everything's fine. She's just bit on the leg. And suddenly, there's these other giants that look the same as the ones laying on the ground. And they're pointing over to the giants that are laying on the ground. They start walking toward the Sid and Opie. And they run. They're trying to run out of the way, and hardly fast enough. And poor Opie gets crushed. And so that, you know, these guys don't even notice. They're just, you know, walking over to see what's happened with these friends here. And meanwhile, Sid is just like, oh my God, Opie, you're dead. And it turns out that these guys on the ground have taken some kind of drugs, and they're totally screwed up, right? And one of them is dead, and the other one is like hopelessly insane. Sid walks off into the jungle, and that's the end. Gore, 1971. In the early days. In the underground days, he was gore. And here we go with the little one-pager by Mobius. Odd. He's getting a little, he's channeling a little Crumb with the legs. An ad for Jailu, which is another company in France, and they publish books, science fiction books. You see all of these guys, Philip K. Dick, Brian Aldiss, Robert Heinlein, Edmund Hamilton, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov. This is Dionnet and Gal, right? Gal is the artist, and this is the Conquering Armies, Les Armies du Conquérant. The Conquering Armies. And this is in Heavy Metal #1. It's one of those that matches, okay? But here's the difference. And this is something that I noticed when I first got Metal Hurlant way back in the day, late 70s. I knew something was different. And I'm going to show you what that difference is. Dionnet, the story in the first place is fantastic, but Gal's art is sublime. It is sublime, folks. The detail is just absolutely amazing. Okay, I'm just going to show you the difference here. This is what I'm talking about. We put the same page side by side. You'll notice something right off the bat, and that is that the contrast is way up on the heavy metal issue, okay? Then if you look, for example, at just the architecture here, the fine lines that Gal has drawn, like within the various patterns on the walls, are gone. They're black. This guy's helmet, you can just see where it's more black, and here you can see the details. So what has happened is they've kicked up the contrast a bit. Okay, so the detail suffers a little bit. Not only that, but you see that? It is really glossy paper. The Metal Hurlant is not that glossy look. It's more matte. I think that has a lot to do with it as well. So I just wanted to point that out. It's just one of those things, like in a story like this, you're going to see it. This is heavy metal, Arzak. Now this is also in Metal Hurlant #1. The color reproduction's fantastic. It looks great. It's hard to see a difference. Okay, it's just when you get into extremely fine line work where the difference is pronounced. Gal is one of those amazing artists from Metal Hurlant and heavy metal that I just marvel at his work, the detail work and everything, and I think his work deserves to be shown in the full detail that it was originally done in. This is just, oh man. Here's Futuropolis. They were talking about Robien, who designed the first Metal Hurlant title. So that's his store, Futuropolis, in France. Incredible issue #1 of Metal Hurlant. Well, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon.